112-454 by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Rogers, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 4, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Rogers of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
This amendment deals with the Freedom of Information Act. It's a 2-minute vote, and there are 5 amendment votes after this one, leading up to a vote on final passage of the cybersecurity bill. We covered Vice President Joe Biden's speech at New York University today. The politicker at theobserver.com writes that Mr. Biden went on the attack, painting Mr. Romney as woefully unprepared for the role of commander-in-chief, describing him as both a flip-flopper who consistently misrepresents his own and Barack Obama's record and views, and as someone even out of step with the rightward tilt of today's Republican Party. The Vice President's speech will be here on C-SPAN in our overnight programming and right now at cspan.org.
The yeas are 412, the nays are 0. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 6, printed in the House Report 112-454 by the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Quayle, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Quayle of Arizona.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote. This vote, the yeas are 410, the nays are 3. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for recorded vote on amendment number 7, printed in the House Report 112-454 by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Amash, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Amash of Michigan.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
The amendment that the House is voting on now would prohibit the federal government from using library records, firearms sales records, and tax returns that it receives from private businesses under the bill. In a press release, House Speaker John Boehner said the vote tomorrow to extend student loan interest rates would be paid for by eliminating a slush fund to the President's health care law. That's in the President's health care law, and that the law is one of the reasons American small businesses today are not hiring more recent college graduates. Representative George Miller, the senior Democrat on the House Education and Workforce Committee, issued a statement saying, "I commend House Republicans for reversing themselves on the pending student loan interest rate hike, but I'm deeply disappointed that Republicans propose extracting the price from women and children to take health care away from middle-class and low-income families in order to keep interest rates from rising for middle-class and low-income college students is simply wrong. It's robbing Peter to pay Peter."
Are 415, the nays are 0. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 8, printed in the House Report 112-454 by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, on which further proceedings were postponed and in which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Mulvaney of South Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are for.
Ms. Waters. Ms. Waters votes aye. Mr. Braley of Iowa. Mr. Braley of Iowa votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 416, the nays are 0. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 13, printed in the House Report 112-454 by the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Goodlatte, on which further proceedings were postponed and which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 13, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Goodlatte of Virginia.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote.
Republican Congressman Robert Goodlatte of Virginia offered this amendment that would narrow definitions on the bill regarding what cyber threat information may be identified, obtained, and shared. One more amendment vote after this one, up to 10 minutes of debate, then a procedural vote, and then a vote on final passage of the cybersecurity bill. To recap some of our live coverage tomorrow, a House Ways and Means Subcommittee looks at changing the Medicare program at 9 a.m. Eastern. And President Obama will give a speech at Fort Stewart, Georgia. That'll be live at 12:35 p.m. Both of those events will be on C-SPAN 3.
In this vote, the yeas are 414, the nays are 1. The amendment is adopted. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on amendment number 15, printed in House Report 112-454 by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Mulvaney, on which further proceedings were postponed, on which the yeas prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 15, printed in House Report number 112-454, offered by Mr. Mulvaney of South Carolina.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 2-minute vote. The yeas are 413, the nays are 3. The amendment is adopted. The question is on the amendment and the nature of a substitute as amendment. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. Accordingly, under the rule, committee rises. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union has had under consideration H.R. 3523 and pursuant to House Resolution
631. I report the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the committee of the whole.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 3523 and, pursuant to House Resolution 631, reports the bill back to the House with an amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole. Under the rule, the previous question is ordered. Is there a separate vote demanded on any amendment to the amendment reported from the Committee of the Whole? If not, the question is on adoption of the amendment in the nature of substitute as amended. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
The bill to provide for the sharing of certain cyber threat intelligence and cyber threat information between the intelligence community and cybersecurity entities and for other purposes.
That's what that order was up there. The House will be in order. The House will come to order. The gentleman deserves to be heard. Members will please take their conversations from the aisles. Members will please take their seats. For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
In its current form, I am.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Perlmutter of Colorado moves to recommit the bill H.R. 3523 to the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendments. At the end of the bill, add the following new section, Section 3, protecting the privacy of Internet passwords and the creativity of the Internet. Nothing in this Act or the amendments made by this Act shall be construed to 1. Permit an employer, a prospective employer, or the federal government to require the disclosure of a confidential password for a social networking website or a personal account of an employee or job applicant without a court order, or 2. Permit the federal government to establish a mechanism to control United States citizens' access to and use of the Internet through the creation of a national Internet firewall similar to the Great Internet Firewall of China, as determined by the Director of the National Intelligence. Page 12, line 22, strike and. Page 12, line 25, strike the period and insert a semicolon. Page 12, after line 25, insert the following. G. The number of Americans who have, I, been required by employers, prospective employers, or the federal government to release confidential passwords for social networking websites, and I, had personal information released to the federal government under this section or obtained in connection with a cybersecurity breach, and H, the impact of the information that has been released or obtained as referred to in subparagraph G on privacy, electronic commerce, Internet usage, and online content.
If all members will please take their seats, take their conversations off the floor. The gentleman from Colorado deserves to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 5 minutes.
The House has heard this before. It's very simple, sweet, and direct. And I'll take a moment and just read it so that everybody has a chance to understand it again. What we're doing is avoiding and prohibiting an employer as a condition of employment demanding a Facebook password, a confidential Facebook password, Twitter, Tumblr, any social media of the like. And it reads this way. Nothing in this Act or the amendments made by this Act shall be construed to permit an employer, a prospective employer, or the federal government to require the disclosure of a confidential password for a social networking website or personal account of an employee or job applicant without a court order, or, in the second paragraph, permit the federal government to establish a mechanism to control United States citizens' access to and use of the Internet through the creation of a national Internet firewall similar to the Great Internet Firewall of China, as determined by the Director of the National Intelligence. So what this amendment does, and it is the final amendment to this bill, there are no more amendments to this bill, is it just does two things, which I know some people voted against this amendment when it was brought up a couple of weeks ago, and for those of you who regret voting against it, you're going to get a chance to correct that vote. This is something I've been working on with Mr. Heinrich and Mr. McHenry, and it just says we're not going to allow, as a condition of employment, the requirement of a Facebook password or the like. Now, there's a reason for this, because one, there is all sorts of personal information that I may have or somebody else may have with respect to their Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn, whatever it might be, and they're entitled to have an expectation of privacy, a sense that their freedom of speech, their freedom to peaceably assemble, in effect, is not violated. So that's the first reason. The second reason is if an employer or the federal government poses as somebody by having their Facebook password, then they can impersonate. They can become an imposter. And it is a two-way exchange of information so that somebody who is completely unrelated to the employment now is communicating with an imposter. So that's another reason for this. The third reason is for the employer themselves to avoid liability by learning information that may then cause them to take actions that would violate a protected group. So there are at least three good reasons to do this. Now, we have precedent in our law, and it is the Employee Polygraph Protection Act of 1988. We said that we're not going to allow, as a condition of employment, the use of lie detectors. You can use background checks. You can use references. There are plenty of vehicles to check out somebody's employment references, but we're not going to allow lie detectors, and we should not allow that the Facebook passwords be given up as a condition of employment.
The House is not in order. The Chair would ask the House to please come to order. The gentleman from Colorado deserves to be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you. So we have precedent in the law. We don't allow polygraphs or lie detectors as a condition of employment. Let's use what we already have, background checks, references, etc. Now, the second piece of this is that we will not allow command and control of the Internet or access to the Internet by the United States government, saying similar. We want to avoid what's happened in China. We want to avoid what's happened in Iran. We don't want the Internet taken down and our access, individuals' access to the Internet, be broken. So there are two pieces to this. One is not allowing the demand of a confidential password and not allowing the government to have a command and control and be able to take down the Internet, similar to what we've seen in other countries. This is a very simple amendment. It's very straightforward. We've had a lot of amendments that have garnered virtually every member of this House. This should be one of those. This is the final amendment. I would hope that we would uphold the Constitution by passing this amendment, as well as making sure that the Internet is available to anyone who wants to use it at any time. And with that, I yield back to the Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I rise in opposition, Mr. Chair.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Today, 300,000 times somebody will be trying to get in to our credit card companies. 300,000 times one company. In just the last few years, just in defense contractors, foreign nation states have stolen more intellectual property that will end up protecting this country. It's equivalent to 50 times the print collection of our U.S. Library of Congress. Anonymous is attacking businesses, and today attacked Wall Street because they're anti-capitalist. There are people out there today that are literally robbing the future of America for our jobs, our prosperity, and our economic prowess in the world, and they're doing it by design. A year ago, we set out to try to do something small. If we have some bad software, some bad malicious virus information, shouldn't we be obligated to share that with the private sector so they can protect themselves? Absolutely. If we don't do this, a nation-state like China has geared itself for the very purpose, its military and intelligence services, for the very purpose of economically wounding the United States by draining our intellectual property dry. And they have done it by stealing pesticide formulas. They have done it by stealing pharmaceutical formulas. They have done it by stealing intellectual property when it relates to military hardware and then copied it and cost us a tremendous amount of more money to have to go back and redesign it. So we can play games. We can do silly things. This amendment actually does nothing to protect a person's private password at home. Nothing. Not one thing. But it is serving to try to obfuscate and maybe get the committee, send it back to committee and come back. This has been a bipartisan bill. I can't tell you how disappointing this amendment is to me. I have worked with Mr. Ruppersberger and the members of this committee. I have worked with the privacy groups. We've worked with civil libertarians. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at us, and by the way, this does nothing, or this would have been thrown at us too. And you know why? Because it doesn't do anything. I get it. Sounds great. You're going to run out and do some bad things with it. But this is our nation's defense. This is the last bastion of things we need to do to protect this country. We've done it since 9/11. We did Homeland Security. We've done the Patriot Act. We've done other things that this body and the other body and the President of the United States signed to protect this country as our Constitution tells us to do for the common defense of this great nation. And I'll tell you something. We can have this debate. We can talk about a bill that does absolutely nothing to protect someone's private password at home, or we can get about the business to try to give the private sector just a little bit of information to protect people's private information in the comfort of their homes, so that we can protect this nation from a catastrophic attack. You know, the director of the National Security didn't say maybe, didn't say could happen. They said it will happen. This is the one small thing we get to do to prepare for a whole bunch of folks out there that want to bring this nation down. We ought to stand together today in a bipartisan way. We ought to reject all of the misconfusion and obfuscation and all of the things they're saying about this bill that just are not true. And we ought to stand here and say, we respected the fact that you kept the government stuff government and the private stuff private, and you're not mixing it up, and you're not surveilling, you're doing none of those things. You're just sharing some pretty bad information so that they can apply it to their patches that happen on your computer every single day, thousands of times a day, to try to keep viruses off your computer, and that's it. So we've spent a lot of time today trying to go in a different direction. People are upset there aren't things in the bill. Okay? I mean, the Buffett rule isn't in the bill. I don't think that ought to get a veto threat either. This is where we are. This is that first small step. I'm going to ask all of you to join us today, reject this red herring, this obfuscation, and stand with America. They need it. You know, there are 3 million businesses with all the associations telling us, please give us that classified secret malware information that your government has so we can protect the people we have as customers and clients. They're begging for it because they're getting killed every single day. It's happening right this second. This is our chance to stand up. This was a bipartisan effort. If you really believe in bipartisanship, if you believe that's the future of this chamber, and that's the dignity of the very founding fathers that gave it to us, then today is the day to prove it. Reject this amendment. Stand for America. Support this bill.
The gentleman from Michigan yields back. Without objection, the previous question is ordered. The question is on the motion to recommit. Will all those in favor say aye? Aye. Will all those opposed say no? No. The opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Speaker, on that I ask for the yeas and nays. Ask for a record vote.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring the vote by the yeas and nays will rise. Sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. Pursuant to clauses 8 and 9 of Rule 20, this is a 15-minute vote on the motion to recommit. followed by 5-minute votes on passage of H.R. 3523 if ordered, and suspension of the rules with regard to H.R. 2050 if ordered. This is a 15-minute vote.
A procedural vote, the last chance to change the cybersecurity bill before a vote on final passage. Here's a reporter for details about the bill.
Tim Starks writes for Congressional Quarterly. Well, with the House working on cybersecurity legislation today, we have the White House last evening issuing a threat to veto. What are the administration's concerns?
Well, the administration has two major concerns. One, they think the bill doesn't do enough as it pertains to protecting the most important computer networks that are owned by businesses. Things like the electricity grid and the railroad control system. Those are things that this bill doesn't impose any new regulations or any new standards on. This bill is strictly focused on information sharing, and it leaves that part out that the administration thinks is essential. The second part is related to whether they think it adequately protects the personal data of information that the businesses would share with the federal government as part of what the idea of the bill is, to exchange information about threats. They don't think that, for instance, it does enough to protect. It's something called minimization. They don't have enough of that in the bill, which would make sure that any data that goes from the businesses to the federal government, that the personal data related to the people that is shared is not is as extensively shared as it would be if they just handed the data over wholesale.
What's the aim of the bill being brought today by House Intelligence Committee Chair Mike Rogers?
Well, his aim is to make sure that the businesses that own these networks that might be attacked by hackers or spies or worst case scenario nation states, that those businesses get information from the federal government. Right now, a lot of that data is classified. There would be a procedure in this bill that would allow these businesses to have temporary or permanent security clearances. So they would be able to receive the threat information that the federal government gets under that procedure. And the other thing it would do is make it so that there would be incentives for the business groups to voluntarily share the threat information that they're seeing on their end. So by, for instance, giving them some legal protections related to privacy laws and for any information that they exchange, and making sure that they aren't subject to a bunch of lawsuits.
Who's opposed to that legislation, and what are their concerns?
Well, the administration starts. There's some House Democrats that are opposed to the bill. Some of their objections are similar to some of the major groups outside of the Capitol Hill that are opposed to it. They share some of the administration's concerns about how much information is shared, how it is shared from the standpoint of privacy and civil liberties. Particularly, one of the things that this bill doesn't do that some of those groups would have wanted to see is make sure that no information goes directly to the hands of the National Security Agency or other military agencies because of historical wrongs that have been related to the NSA, and other spy agencies having track records that aren't considered very positive when it comes to, protecting the privacy of individuals in the United States.
Any amendments in the spotlight that you're watching today?
Well, there are a few amendments that are actually backed by the committee and the sponsors, because they have been trying to ease these concerns about the privacy, situation, the privacy concerns that people have about their bill. So some of those are amendments that will help go a ways toward easing some concerns, although not some of the ones that I just mentioned about that are left unaddressed about NSA and who receives the data. So some of the things that limit the purposes, for instance, for which the government could receive this cybersecurity data, those are important amendments toward long-term support of the bill. The other amendments there's some other amendments out there that are not considered as favorable by the sponsors. Things like sunsets that would expire the bill in 5 years. Things that would even further narrow the scope of the purposes of the information that can be used. There are a few like that will probably have trouble getting enough passage, but there's also a sense that some of these bills have been sponsored by some of these amendments have been co-sponsored by Republicans. So we'll see how that plays out, whether they'll actually have enough votes to narrow the bill further than the sponsors want it to be narrowed.
Now, in one of your stories earlier this week, you highlight the lobbying effort behind this legislation. Who are some of the key players, quickly?
Well, business groups are very influential on this. The whole issue of the anti-piracy bills that were controversial a few months back, SOPA and PIPA, those two bills, those bills were opposed not only by privacy advocates but also by technology companies. This bill is sponsored not only by the major business groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but it's not sponsored, but endorsed by. It's also supported by some of those technology groups, your Facebooks, those kinds of companies that had an earlier role in defeating SOPA and PIPA. So they're influential on the side in making sure that it gets through, and then on the other side of people who are opponents are the privacy groups.
A lot to be said about this legislation. Tim Starks is a staff writer for Congressional Quarterly. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
An update on another piece of legislation. The Senate Agriculture Committee today made the final changes to the Farm Bill, approving it by a vote of 12-4 and moving the bill to the Senate floor. We spoke to a reporter about it. Chuck Abbott is on Capitol Hill covering the Farm Bill for Reuters. What are a few of the changes in the bill?
Well, excuse me. Most notably, the proposal being given to the committee by Chairman Stabenow will create a new farm support system. Since the 1930s, farm supports have been based on government attempts to prop up market prices. So with the particularly in the last 6 or 7 years, we've had a run of very high market prices, including usually we've had record high prices. And there's a belief that a new system would be a better choice, and this new system would be an insurance-like program which would protect farmer revenue against low prices and the effect of bad yields or bad weather. So that I mean, it's a more comprehensive approach to farm supports than has been used since farm subsidies began. That's the big thing in what's called the commodity title. In the conservation portion of the bill, there would be less land would be set aside for long-term, set aside from crops for long periods of time, and more attention would be paid on what is called working lands, which is the land that produces crops. And the idea is that there would be more of a focus of lower cost supports that encourages farmers to practice soil, water, and wildlife conservation as part of producing crops.
Well, it sounds like some major changes. How are groups reacting to it? What kind of lobbying is happening?
Well, as you know, the markup was delayed for a day, partly because some of the groups, particularly southern producers, rice and peanuts, were unhappy with what was in the bill. The approach that Chairwoman Stabenow is taking to what is called a shallow loss revenue protection program is most popular in the Midwest, which means it appeals to corn and soybean growers the most. It has some support from wheat growers. It's less popular in the South, where growers say crop insurance has not been a good deal for them, and so creating another program similar to crop insurance may have its drawbacks. And the rice growers particularly were upset because there was very little in the bill offered for them back in the fall during this super committee process. The leaders of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees tried balancing this all off by saying, okay, we'll give some crops higher target prices, which means a higher guaranteed price for their products, and we'll give other crops, the chance to use this revenue program. But those higher target prices were taken out of the bill that's being presented to the committee.
The bill is some 900 pages long.
Right. It is.
Can you give us an idea of the scope of the bill? How many people does it impact?
Oh, well, one could say that it impacts everybody in the United States because it affects food production. That's a simple but rather large way of expansive way of defining it. But it affects people who care about environmental protections because farmers control something like 900 million acres of land in the United States, which is a good chunk of the United States. And there's also a nutrition section in the bill, which most prominently is food stamps, or now it's called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And that affects somewhere around 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 Americans right now because of the high unemployment rate. There's also sections on as it's called, energy, but it mostly means attempts to develop bioenergy, particularly in this case would be second generation biofuels, and to come up with biomass crops that could be another way for farmers to make money aside from traditional food crops. The bill has more than a dozen titles. I mean, there's research there's mention of research projects. There's international food aid programs. There's export promotion programs. There's programs to encourage farmers overseas to grow more food themselves, so they don't have to rely on international aid when they run short on food. It is an incredibly expansive bill.
Chuck Abbott is a commodities correspondent for Reuters on Capitol Hill covering the Farm Bill. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the Senate Agriculture Committee voted 12-4 to approve the Senate Farm Bill, and it's now going to head to the floor. Up next, a vote on final passage of the cybersecurity bill here in the House. An update on the Senate as this vote winds down. The Senate today passed a 5-year reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. Congressional Quarterly says this sets up a likely disagreement with the House over the scope of the legislation. Senators passed the bill 68-31 after defeating 3 amendments, including a substitute favored by Senate Republicans that's expected to resemble the eventual House GOP version.
On this vote, the yeas are 183, the nays are 233. The motion is not adopted. The question is on the passage of the bill. Those in favor will say aye. Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I would request a record roll call vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is over.